What's up, y'all? Here in another episode of Ethan the Fence Man. We are finally getting to the trans swap in the wife's car. See, there's the trans. The AODE from the 92 Vic going in place of the 4R70W in the 97 Vic here. And I've thought about it long and hard. It would be nice to just leave the engine in the car, put the thing up on jack stands 18-20 inches or so, and then pull the trans out the bottom, leave the motor in place. However, I don't have a trans jack, and we do have an engine hoist here, so it seems like we're just going to go ahead and pull the hood and take everything loose and take the whole motor trans out together, set it down on the shop floor, and then do our trans swap there and then put it back in. Because I reckon that's going to be the best route to go with me not having the appropriate jack. See, I got a regular jack here, but I'd have to set a board or something on it to go under the trans, and then working by myself, that's going to be difficult to keep the trans balanced so I don't like drop one of them on the floor. And we really need to keep both those cases intact, so we can't really drop either of them. So this seems like the best route to go without causing damage to things, even though I think it's a little extra work. So now we're going to go ahead and get started, remove on the hood, pull out the battery, start taking some things loose under the hood, then we'll dip down underneath and pull out the drive shaft. About time to clean the leaves out of here anyway. That'll make these things get all rusty and break and fall apart, and then your windshield wipers don't work anymore. Alright, now that we're down this far, we're going to get to removing the radiator. So we'll come in here, get all our drip pans in place, drain our coolant, take our trans cooler lines loose from the radiator and from the trans cooler if this car has one. I don't remember. Get all those draining out, then we'll pull the radiator out. After that, we should have plenty of the forward clearance to come out and tilt it and get her all coming out above this core support, radiator core support, front end type metal, that thing right there, that. Now we've got our whole lower radiator hose disconnected from the motor and from the bottom of our tank over there and completely removed from the car. Got our trans lines loose and the ends all taped up to prevent us getting stuff inside of those. Now the radiator is all unplumbed, we can come up here and remove our top 8mm bolts that hold the guy in place and slide the radiator out, and then we'll move right on back to removing the alternator, because we're going to need to use these two lower mounts for the alternator to pull the whole thing out. Now we've just disconnected our heater hoses from the motor. Coming back this way, this guy is going to come out with the engine, I believe. Yeah, it's coming out with it. This hose right here, this upper vacuum line, we need to take it loose because it's going to stay with the car body. Right here we have this ground that needs to come loose from the car body. It's going with the motor. And then right up here at our fuse box, if you'll notice this little trap door guy, we need to take that bolt off. That's going to take this red wire loose and these other two wires underneath. Those two wires are going to ride with the motor harness. Same thing here. On our positive connection, we're going to take our headlight relays loose from that. And over here on the negative side, we'll take our ground loose from our headlight relays and this ground here, and then the black and the red battery wires are going to go with the motor. After that, we've got right underneath the brake master cylinder, best possible location for 50,000 wires, we've got these two big harness plugs. We're going to unplug those, and then electronically the engine drivetrain is all loose from the car. Yeah, cool, huh, right? Now I've got all my electrical bits taken loose. The big plugs up there, they're going to come out with the drivetrain. Down here on my steering box, you might be able to see right back here, there's an open hole now. Right there's a connection. That connection that's hooked up is staying in. It runs up to this side of our reservoir. I've got this other hose taken loose. It's coming with the motor and the power steering pump. And then that has us separate in the power steering department. Then back over here, I just got our fuel lines loose from the fuel rail. Got really lucky on my little tool that I whittled down on our last job, the last drivetrain we pulled out of a Vic, where I whittled one of these down to make the connector tool. Definitely recommend that me and y'all get the right guy to pop those quick connect, quick disconnect things loose, because this thing's a bit of a pain. If you'll see, it's got the notches only on like one side than the other side. The appropriate tool looks more something like this, but the correct size. And see, when you get on there, it goes all the way around and it just works so much faster and easier. My method here works, but I gotta get the right tool, because that kind of sucks. But anyway, that's everything loose there. Coming over here to this corner, I've just unplugged the connection from my clutch on the AC compressor. We're going to pull those 3, 4, whatever they are, 10mm bolts, and drop that compressor down, hang it, whatever we need to do to try to not have stress on its lines here, because we want to keep the whole AC system in the car when the drivetrain comes out, because it still works, and that's the one fluid that I can't refill so easily. So we're going to try to leave all that connected. See, the condenser still up here on the front. Leave all that unbroken open, and then just take the compressor off the motor, hang it to the side, and then we can just bolt it back after we take everything out and back in, swap trans, and yeah, all that fun. Now I've got my AC compressor down there that you can't see in the dark. It's loose and sitting down on top of the steering linkage, so it should hang out right there while the rest of it comes up. I went the extra mile here and taped up all my open spots. You could probably get away without doing that, especially with us being indoor in a shop, but just trying to be careful, because you know, I got birds flying in and out of here every now and then and stuff. There's probably one up there now. I think I hear one fluttering around. See, there's a bird nest up there. So stuff does fall, little bits of dirt and stuff every now and then, so we just want to do whatever we can to keep all our holes clean, so we're not sucking dirt and rusty fellers and whatnot into the vacuum system. And besides that, everywhere I see a little blue tape, I know I need to hook something back up there when it goes back in, so that's good. Anyway, now it's about time to move back down underneath the car. We need to pull the starter out, we need to pull the drive shaft out, and then we can start taking mounting bolts loose, motor mounts, and the bolts that go into the transmission mount, because we're going to leave the cross member in place. Should be able to pick it up and come on out with it. Now we're moving to removing on the drive shaft, and we've got 4 12.12mm bolts attaching that flange to the axle. Well, this is pretty sweet compared to most of the times when you gotta pull bolts out in this situation. There's actually room to get a big 1/2-inch drive breaker bar and a 1/2-inch drive socket, all no problems, all the way around all 4 bolts without even having to roll the car back and forth. Now moving back up here under the car towards the transmission. See right here, we just took the drive shaft loose. I've got this wrapped up real tight with a piece of plastic, because right now you should be draining the fluid out, but I'm going to try to just not drain the fluid out if I can. And then maybe this will seal it in so it doesn't dump all over the floor. Definitely would not recommend you do this if you're pulling your trans in and then plan on putting it back in, because there's probably some dirt around the inside edge of that seal, and I'm going to be contaminating the crap out of my fluid when I tilt this trans and this fills up. But that doesn't matter in my case, because this whole trans is going to be, we're going to be taking it all apart and trying to put a $100 rebuild kit in it. So it'll be completely torn down and washed all out and built back up, and it won't matter what the fluid was like in it anyway. Anyway, moving down here, there's 2 bolts right here. I just took the nuts off of that. The trans mount sits into this bracket by, so we should be able to lift up on it high enough to clear these bolts. That's what we did on the last car anyway. On this car we have an actual intact exhaust system, so that'll be fun. I've soaked down on my flange bolts here. We're going to try to just take these 4 bolts out for now and leave the 4 big cats in place, and maybe we can lift up and have enough room to lift up and tilt and whatever we need to get it out. Now right here on the side of the trans, this is the shift linkage. We've just unbolted this big, seems like 18mm nut, taking it loose here, and then right back up this way you'll see there's a big bracket. We need to unbolt that from the bell housing, and then this will hang down out of the way. We'll tie it up out of the way, whatever we need to do. We actually don't have to unbolt this whole bracket here. Sorry, I got you really close. We don't have to unbolt this whole bracket. This clip here has little holdy doodads on each side of these holes, and it slips up out of the way. Sweet! We got really lucky here, and we're able to pull all 4 of them old rusty bolts and their old rusty nut flange, funny looking thing. That thing's kind of cool because it spins around and hits up against the pipe, and you don't have to hold a wrench on the other side of it. Now when we have the motor out of the car, it's going to be real tempting to go ahead and pull this single exhaust system out. And on our 92 cop car, it came with the factory dual pipulators. Yeah, might be knowing where I'm going with that. Anywho, back to the trans problem. Now, I do believe we have everything loose except our front motor mounts, or only motor mounts. Yeah, the front ones. So now we just need to come in and unbolt on those guys, which I believe was a weird situation. 2 bolts on this side, 1 bolt on that side, or something like that. When you're pulling the motor mount bolts on these cars, it's a little weird. See, because here's our bolts. We got the 2 big long ones on the driver's side, and that little short guy's on the passenger side. I'll show you the upper one in a second. Here's how you get to the motor mount, the mount on this side. Right up in here in this crevasse in this area, see we're under your intake manifold on the driver's side. Right up in here, there's one of those long bolts comes out of this hole here, and then another one further up there, like right under the... And then your other motor mount bolt right here underneath the passenger side manifold. Yeah, see, there you go. That's where it came out of. Down here on the passenger side, I showed you earlier, there's the one little bolt in the motor mount. There's also one other long bolt that goes in from the front ways behind the AC compressor. A couple long extensions and a 1/2-inch socket. So here's my situation for pulling the motor out. My 4-way guide, the chains are a little short to hook where I'd like to, and the balancy, what do you call that guy, the leveler part, is going to be all up into my upper intake here. So I have this big beefy chain. I just cut a link in to make it 2 big beefy chains, and now I have this chained to the 2 mounting bolts for the alternator. And then on the back side here, we're attached to the 2 upper transmission to engine bolts. So that'll extend on my chains. Now when I hang this up, I can just hook the 2 chains to the back and those 2 chains to the front, and that'll give me the extra clearance to not be getting into things. And that about wraps it up out here for tonight. In the next instant, what am I even doing? In the next instant, we'll be back out here in the morning and hooking up the engine hoist and lifting up on our drivetrain. Alright, here we are the next day. And here's my hoist situation. Showed you the chains there last night. Got those bolted up to the ends of my 4 chains on the leveler. So now we're at the point, it's about time to start gently lifting up on it and watching for all our clearances. Like our AC pump down there needs to stay to the left, and these lines need to come up, slip right past it. So let's start cranking on it. Okay, so it looks like the plan of trying to leave the 4 big cats in place and pull it out that way, it might be possible if I had the right type of tilty equipment, but it's not easy. I don't think I'd recommend it. So we're going to gently set it back down and take those exhaust pipes off. Now we've got those pulled out of the way. It's bound to make things easier. I knew it would be easier to just pull those to start with. I was just trying to not to. And you really just need to. Here we are with that drivetrain pulled, the other transmission next to it, and I can see a few of the differences like I read online. This tail shaft is longer on the AODE than it is in the 4R70W, which is no big deal. We're not swapping on those. We're just going to take the whole drive shaft from the 92 car and put it in the 97 car. So that'll make up for the length difference. It looks like all the ways that our trans lines hook up are the same. All of these plug-ins, we've got one there, and then one here, another one there, and then the big plug into where the gear shifter guys are. All those plugs look like they're the same. There's just one big difference right here I see. This shift mount bracket is up here on the front of the trans. It's in the dark there. And that one is back here on the back side. On the 4R70W trans here, our shift linkage situation seems to be reversed. See, we have this bracketeer arm and it hooks off of that guy there. On the other car, the cable's extra long and it comes and wraps around the other way and hooks on here and pulls that way. And this one, park, is all the way up here. And on this trans, it's in park now, slid all the way back. So it looks like the arm on here is just reversed. Like that one's down, this one's up. So I think I can swap this and the arm between the two transes. But then we've got the conundrum up here of getting this set up differently on that one. it looks like we have pedestals in the right place, but we're gonna need to drill and tap a situation there, so that should be easy. But anyway, for right this second, next move, I'm gonna go ahead and get this trans pulled off of that motor. So we're gonna unplug all our wiring harness. Then I'm gonna come down here, remove on the inspection plate, just because it's gonna get in the way. This whatever this thing's called, the big metal gasket type spacer guy here, is going to be under the flywheel. So with those bolts in that guy, it's not going to let her back up, you know what I mean? Yeah, spacer's going to stay, trans is going to go. Anyway, pull those bolts out, take the inspection cover off, and then be a smart feller and use this big giant access hole in here. Oh look, this one comes with a cover for it. The other one probably used to have. The other car that trans came out of, it probably used to have the inspection cover, but that was a reman trans, meaning somebody had put it in there already. So it had already been gone through. So that's probably why that cover is gone on the other car, other motor. Anyway, we'll pull that cover off, take our torque converter bolts loose, unbolt the guy, make him two things. Okay. Now we've got our wiring harness all unplugged, and I've removed on the starter down here, which lives up in this hole, is attached with 3 10mm bolts. Just looks like an absolute nightmare to get to in the car, I bet. Anyway, I had this little red plastic cappy device that covered the connections on the starter. I taped it back to my wires to make sure I remembered about it, and it actually goes back on the starter. Keep all the original bits there. Also, it looks like I don't know how to decode on the numbers here, if they even do mean anything specificalized, but I'm pretty sure that is a factory original tag, because on my donor trans here from the 92, you just about can't read anything it says, but in the corner up here this guy says remanufactured, and it looks like, you know, a tag that was made up and spit out real quick. This one looks like she came out of a factory assembly line. So yeah, speculating this is the original trans from 1997. I hope so. Car's only got like 1 to 150,000 miles on it, which I guess that's about right. So now we're moving down here. Ooh, got all that stuff taken off. Got my inspection plate removed. I even seen on different things online when I was reading about removing on the trans out of the car from the different forums, and other people said to take the nuts loose from down there in the inspection cover with one of the swoopy wrenches. Am I not the only one that didn't see the big giant hole right here to get to those nuts with the appropriate, you know, half-inch drive situation? Or is maybe this giant access hole not common on all the 4.6s possibly? Maybe those people just goofed up like I did the first time and didn't realize that was there. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to take those 4 bolts loose. We're going to take that one loose. Then we're going to come up here and we're going to roll the motor around, and we're going to take the other 3 loose. Now we got all 4 of our little rounded over beveled edge nuts off of the torque converter. If you remember from the other video where we pulled the trans out of the cop car and took it loose from the motor, 1 or 2 of these nuts were like different things, indicating somebody lost 1 or 2 of them and put different things on. See, we got all originals in this time. She's original. So now I'm going to come through and take loose every bolt holding the bell housing to the back of the motor, and then we should be able to move it apart. So now we need to come in here, slide the new old trans to the side. We're going to pull the flywheel off the back of the 4.6 here and replace the rear main oil seal, since we was right here, and it does look like it leaks a little bit. You can't tell from here, but there's oil on the back side of it. We're Now when it comes to breaking all these bolts loose, you're going to have to hold the crank still on the motor. Here was my quick and easy way of getting it to hold still for me. See, I ran a bolt through that big access hole there, put the washers on it so it catches on the ledge, and now when I crank to the left, it doesn't just spin the motor to the left. This is what it looks like when you pull that flex plate off, and then this is like a metal gasket spacer type of situation. They do it on all the Fords. We'll slide that off of those dowel pins right here and all up in there. See how wet this all is and all the leaky mess. The back side of this oil pan is covered in oil. That's all signs to this seal around here is chooched. Now I've just cleaned all around the edges of this really well, because as soon as we open this up, we're opening up to the inside of the motor and your oil passages, and any dirt built up all around the edge here, especially from the oil seeping around the edges over time, it really collects on the dirt. When you pull this case off, this cover off, all that dirt's going to fall down into your oil, and that's really not a good time on your bearings. So now we'll go ahead and pull the bolts out and take it off, and I believe it won't spill the oil out because the oil level should be lower than the top of the pan. So I think it only leaks when she's running under oil pressure. Now that we've removed all the 8mm bolts around the edge and the two 10mm oil pan bolts from the bottom, we should be able to prise it right off. Yep. And there you go. Now we need to clean this mating surface really well. And the new seal that I got was just the seal part, so hopefully this one presses out and the new one presses in, and this isn't just like a one-piece assembly type of situation, because I don't know. Now I've got the old seal out. It came out in that direction. It looks like this is an oil slinger. I just looked it up online. So we're going to clean this up really good, clean the motor up really good. We're going to put the case back in place without the seal in it, get it all bolted back in, torque down, bolts on the bottom too. And then we're going to take our new seal, grease it up nice, and then work it around the end of the crank, and then we're going to push it in. It's going to seat into this cover just far enough to allow for this oil slinger guy to sit back down in there on the end of the crankshaft. And we got to be careful we don't push it too far, because you see we could just slide it right into the back of the motor and have to take it off and do it again. Okay, now we have all our gasket surfaces cleaned up really nice, and don't forget to clean up the edge of the flywheel, the crankshaft here. That needs to be very clean of the debris. And we've got our cover clean. Right, Mother? Yeah. Now I'm going to come in here with my RTV gasket maker stuff and make a nice even coating all around this outside edge. Now that we're all gooped up good, we can press the cover in place without the seal in it, and our dowel pins will keep us lined up. Now we got all our bolts back in, and we're going to take our new seal. You see this side, you can see a spring. That side goes in, the flat side faces out. We're going to take some fresh motor oil and run it all around the inside of this guy to help make it easier to install and make sure it doesn't shred on the first startup. And then hopefully it'll just slide right over. Probably not. Now that we've got our lip all the way around the edge, we can start very carefully driving the seal into place. We're using the old seal here. Use it this way. And now right here, you'll see we're starting to be flush with the case, and you can see the edge of the crankshaft. This guy here is called an oil slinger. Not necessary for us, it doesn't sound like. It's more about keeping dust out of the seal on the standard shift guys. But anyway, we're definitely going to use it because this guy makes it easy to tell when you've got this seal far enough in. So we're going to drive it in nice and easy and even, just a little bit, and then we'll put this back on. And when we get to where, see how we have a lip here, when we get to where this oil slinger sits flush against the crankshaft, we have that seal in far enough. We want to be real careful not to go too far, because if you do, that seal can pop right out the backside and just land on the crankshaft, and then you gotta, you know, pull it off and do it again. When I was looking in my little repair manual, shop manual guy, Chilton's, about the torque specs on these bolts, I know the two at the bottom are the oil pan torque spec, which was like 15 foot-pounds, then an additional 60 degrees. And then these other guys I found online, and they're in inch-pounds, and I really need to get me an inch-pound torque wrench, but they're going to be 6 to 9 foot-pounds in that scale.
and they got a little pattern. You're gonna go a 1, a 2, a 3, 4, 5, 6. Like you would imagine makes sense, you know, big cover guy, you don't want to tighten them all up from one side and go to the other. But yeah, now I'm gonna do that, and then we'll move to the front seal in the transmission. Hi there, Muffin. Muffin is upset from the stormy weather coming in. So now that we have our rear cover plate, I think this is called, or it's something to do with the seal, it's a rear seal retainer, those might both be right. We're about ready to go back on with our flywheel, or our flex plate, because she's automatic drive. But before we do that, it's very important we don't forget our plate spacer thingy and the direction that it goes on, because this thing looks like it would fit either way. But see, we got the funny looking teardrop hole on our flex plate nut access hole over there, and on the starter side we've got the circle with a notch. See, wait, maybe put you on there with the notch. Now that we slid our plate back on, we can start gooping up all our bolts for the what you call it, the flex plate. And one other thing, I don't know if it's the case here with the 4.6s, but I know on my 302 the flywheel is weighted, and it's very important that it goes back on the same way that it came off. So that may not be the case here, but either way, I'm going to make sure to put it back on the same direction as I had my the star was straight up and my hole over here was cattywampus to the other guy. Yeah, you remember. And now we can torque all our flywheel to crankshaft bolts to 59 to 64 foot-pounds. So I'm at 61. Almost forgot my crank holder 9000. Now we're moving over here to the donor transmission, and we're gonna pull the torque converter out. Maybe we've got enough of the fluid out of it that it's not gonna dump everywhere. I'm not sure, but we're gonna get it out of the way and get down to our front seal. Okay, that's good. Hide that with a clean rag. Anywho, when you get the torque converter out of the way, now we're coming down in here to this shaft seal. We're going to take our rag and clean all around here real nice and easy. We don't want to get dirt and stuff all over this. So we want to clean up around here so when we pull that seal off we don't dump a bunch of dirt behind where the seal goes or onto all this. Well, it got a lot cleaner in there. I didn't realize till I started like wiping it all out. You're bumping my camera. Hi, Muff. I didn't realize till I started wiping it all out exactly how filthy dirty it was inside here, with like literal dirt too. I'm thinking that had to be a result of the big access hole for the torque converter bolts not having the plug in it on the car this came out of. But yeah, look at it now. Ooh. Now we can pull our seal off. When it comes to prying inside this case, it just occurred to me that it is like really difficult to get the typical prying tools back in there, especially like short screwdrivers and whatnot. I have this this old pry-in poke-in type device left to us by my wife's passed away father, and it just seems to be the absolute ticket for this. You see the little swoop on the end of it? Muffin on the camera. With that swoop, I was able to get down here, get under the edge of it, and I could still drive the end of this guy with my old hammer here. And it just made smooth, easy sailing. Pick a little, pick a little, pick a little, and it just popped right out easy. But I could tell if I didn't have this little guy with that swoopy edge, this would be super big pain in the butt. So just so you know, you want the guy with the swoopy edge. Now I've got my new seal driven well. I actually just got interrupted for a one of them scam calls. Your vehicle service warranty is running up. Is it now? Running out. Oh no. Anyway. Yes, so got the new seal drove in, and it's the same situation as the rear main on the motor. You seep up that rubber bit on the inside really good with the trans fluid. That way when we slide the torque converter back in, it doesn't grab a dry rubber seal and just mess it up on the way in. And we slid our torque converter back in. Then we can move to the seal at the other end. And if you've never put a torque converter back in an automatic trans before, it's going to feel all weird and wonky the first time. And if you don't know what a torque converter looks like on the inside, if you look up a video of that on the YouTubes and get an understanding of the parts on the inside, it'll make a lot more sense why it feels the way it does when you put it on. Because like when you first slide it on, there's splines on the housing, and then it goes through splines on another loose bit, and then it goes through splines on the little impeller guy in the middle, and then it goes through splines on another bit, and then after you get all those lined up and slid on, which is real easy, you just gotta pick up, down, you know, get her into the hole, then it clunks in like twice. And you'll definitely know if you don't have it clunked in all the way when you try to mount it back to the motor. They won't go together nice. There won't be room anyway. You won't be able to bolt the trans all the way to the motor. Now, back here at this end, I've already pried out the other seal to make sure I had the right one when I bit back to the auto parts store earlier. But, just like the other ones, you may be catching on to a pattern here, fellers. Clean it up real good, pry the old one out. Look out for Muffin. Slob up the rubber bit that makes contact with the spinny bits really good with whatever fluid that they carry. You know, trans fluid on these guys, oil on the other guy, and then pop it in place. Just make sure you lube it or you'll tear it up when you slide your drive shaft in. One more thing on these guys. It's got a hole in the bottom of it. Point it down. Not sure if that's like a condensate drain or if the seal goes bad, you can start seeing it leaking out the hole and you know the seal's bad. Not sure what the purpose of the hole is, but point it down. Alright, now the next step that we're taking in our trans swap before we mount it back to the motor. I probably could go ahead and mount it to the motor, but just in case I have an issue here, we're going to leave it out right now. We're going to move over to do something brand new. I've always wanted a tap-in die set, and I finally have the a reason why I actually had to go get one. And this is a cheap little $25, $35 something dollar, another one from O'Reilly's. So it's like my very first beginner tappies guide. So first let me tell you what we're doing. As you see here, these two pedestal guys on the side of the bell housing, if you could even call it a bell housing because it's just transmission case. Anyway, these two guys, you see how they got holes in them? These two bolts came out of those holes, and those holes hold the shifter bracket, holds the shifty guy still, the cable that pulls in and out on your doodad. And if you'll notice back here, you see there's pedestals and holes laid out on the back side of the case. Over here on our AODE from the 92, you'll notice it has the other shifty mechanism where the thing's back here, and we've got pedestals in the front. However, maybe you see where we're going here. No holes there. So this is really neat, fun thing. So I got my bolt that came out of it, and because, you know, it's just a little beginner set and I've only got like 17 different taps to choose from, I've seen that this is a National Course 20 thread. There's National Course and National Fine and National Pipe thread. I don't know why we need to say national so many times, but yeah, coarse, fine, and pipe thread. I guess that means it's American. I don't know. Maybe the metric size is I don't know. It's my first tap and die set. Anyway, this is NC 20, course 20, and that's a 5/16 guy. And here I've only got, what is it, like two, I think, two 5/16 dies, and it's a 18 and a 21. Yeah, 20 ain't gonna work on a 21, fellas. She won't thread. So I started looking through my hoard of the different bolts and nuts and fasteners, and I found that I do have a few bolts that will work with a few of my things. So I actually had some options. The first thing I found was this guy, which is pretty close, but it's just a little short, and when I put the bracket on it, I just don't like how short that is. And then I found this one, which is neat, but it's a little skinny. But then I found this one. It's not too skinny and it's not too short, and we've got the tap in the situation. Oh boys, we got the parts and pieces. So now I get to go to my chart and see that it takes, I'm using a 5/16 I guess 5/16 wide tap with the 18 NC thread pitch, and that requires a 17/64 drill bit. Hopefully I have one of those. I got a little drill bit set, we might. And then if we got that, we'll be drilling a hole or two. Harbor Freight drill set to the rescue. Probably can't read that, but there's the 17/64 that we're looking for. Careful with that one now, it's the only one. And I've come down here, held my bracket up right about where I think it goes. I got two center marks. We're going to drill one of them, tap the hole, mount or hold the guy up, put that bolt in, and then we'll readjust the other one if necessary. You know, if I go drilling both of these holes at the same time, they are not going to line up. It's just how life works. Alright, now I've got a hole drilled. I don't have the proper lubricant probably for the the tapping process, so we'll try some PB Blaster, and then I'll do my first ever shot tapping a hole. Wish me luck, guys. So I had to run the tap in a little deeper, and I put it in and out a few times because it seems like the flutes here don't really push the cut bits very well, so it looks like it would get jammed up. So instead of drilling the whole threads at once, I kind of went a little, took it out, cleaned it out, went a little, you know what I mean? And then I went in and out of it a few more times. And anyway, boys, look at what we did. We have friggin' threads for our bolt and our pedestal. Oh, we're so cool now. Ooh, that is, oops, sorry, flipping you off. Ooh, that is neat. That is so cool. I'm really excited about being able to put threads into holes now. That is so neat. Yeah. Anyway, now we're gonna, hold the guy up there, put the bolt on, make sure the other mark's relatively close to where it needs to be, drill the hole, do the thing, and then do other things. Ooh. Got the Loctite on the bolts. We are cool now. Look at us go. Now I can snug those down to so many foot-pounds. Not a clue how many, so not too many. It is aluminum. Look. Weight savings. Transmission weighs less now. There you go. We can also come back here, take the other old bracket off, or the old bracket off, and then the next thing, we're going to pull these two bolts here. This guy, I think, will come right off of the little shafty guy here, and then we can figure out how to switch our thing out with the thing on the other guy. Well, fellers, probably should have looked at this before I did that. It would appear, I was thinking that this guy like mounted over that. That's how it is on the trans in one of my trucks. I don't know how it is on the other truck. Anyway, I was thinking that mounted over the shaft. It looks like we need to get into the transmission, pull the pan off, and take this apart from the inside and swap it with the other one. Or I need to swap shift cables in the car. So we need to figure out what's the best option to go there, and yeah, dang it! We thought about it, and we're transmission mechanics now, so we're swapping the shifter arm instead of having to get into the car and the dash and move the shifty cable and do the same thing in the other car. The transmissions are right here, boys. Might as well. And then there's the other thing too. I was researching on how you remove the shifter arm from inside the trans and all that, and as it turns out, Ford, I think, is one of the only people that makes you have to go inside the trans to change that arm, and they use 16 different arms in all these AODE transes that are in everything, the big SUVs, little SUVs, cars, trucks, all sorts of things. So I reckon it's gonna be good for us to be familiar with getting in there and changing the shifter arm anyway, because it sounds like that's a common thing if you move Ford automatic transmissions around, and I'm sure we're gonna do something like this again in some other vehicle one day, so let's just get into it. This one for the first time, that one for like the third time now, but she's gonna be ready when it goes in. Alright, to start with, we're going to come over here to our 4R70W, pull the pan off of it, and make sure that we're even capable of removing the shifter arm. I watched a YouTube video, I should be fine. But in case something goes horribly wrong, we're not going to start on the trans that we're using right now. Here we got the pan off. You might be able to see on our magnet there, she is absolutely caked with the friction materials. You might be able to, I don't know if the camera's picking it up or not, but there's like a big blob here that just looks really gray. That's third gear. Moving over here to our shifty mechanism swap, this looks like a pretty simple situation. If you'll notice, right here, this is the shaft arm handle guy that we're pulling out. See, it comes through a hole in the block. There's a roll pin right here. You pull that. I might even be able to get that without pliers. You pull that
out of the hole that's in like this circle detent in the shaft, so it doesn't move in and out, doesn't fall out. Down here you'll see there's this big rooster tail looking thing. We need to take this bolt out, pull the detentilizer thing off of there, and then there's a 13/16 nut right down here. This nut holds the rooster tail guy to this shaft. And then you'll see here, this is what actuates your gears inside the valve body of the trans, and this guy just slips right out of there, and we just need to make sure it goes back in the right slot, not the other slot. And check out the operation of things. Let's see, right now we're in park. See right back here, this big arm guy, his name's Paul. That's your parking Paul. If you may be able to, I don't know, it's kind of dark in there. There's a gear right in here that Paul's got his tooth into, and when we take it out of park, try and go one gear. That's park, and when we come out, see how it lifted up, locks down, lifts up. That's what makes the vehicle sit still while you're in, when you put it in park. Yeah, looks pretty simple. And I see on the bottom side of our rooster tail looking guy, we have an appendage that comes over here and controls things and stuff. And it looks like all that just chills out right inside the case while we move things in and out. So I got a big crescent wrench and held on to the flat spot up here at the top of it. I used a crescent wrench because a 1/2 inch wrench is like the best fit, but it's a little loose. So a crescent wrench gets a lot tighter fit on it. And then I cracked that loose with 13/16. Next we can remove this roll pin, and it seems like the best way to do that is a pair of cutters or a pair of dikes. The reason for that is this is all slick and covered in stuff, and it seems like if you get on it with a pair of pliers, you're going to squish the pin. And it seems like if you squish the pin, it's going to be really hard to remove when it's deformed. But on something with a cutting edge, it bites it really nice. You don't have to squeeze it very hard, and then it comes right out. Now we should be able to come upward, get our nut the rest of the way off, because it runs into that sensor looking feller. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say we need to be really careful not to drop this nut. It looks like we could lose it into the case and just have a bad time. Okay. Now this, yep, wiggles right off of there. Snug here at the end. Yep, and that's how you remove the shifty arm on a Ford AODE. And now when we're going back in with the new arm, we keep in mind that it was pointing up before. Because right down here on the bottom of it, there's these two flat sides, so you can mate with the rooster tail guy either one way or 180 degrees the other way, whichever way suits your application. Whatever suits you, there, bud. Okay, bit of a dilemma, probably not too big a deal, unless it is a big deal.
The bolt here looks like from where the pin goes in to hold this guy in place down is slightly longer on the AODE than it is on the 4R70. So we have this issue here. You see our gear selector valve body guy. She just doesn't. It's not quite long enough, fellers. But it shouldn't be too big a deal. Like I just showed y'all, remember it pointed down before. We can clock it 180 and point it up. And then I can pop this little bracket off and pop it onto this one, and we'll be in the right direction. Hopefully, you notice how there's a bend onto it, and there's not a bend onto it. Hopefully that doesn't cause us to run into the floor of the car. There may be a reason why that bend's there. But yeah, if that becomes an issue, I guess we're going to have to try to bend the arm. But hopefully there's plenty of clearance and we can just put the original arm back in, clock the other way, and then there you go. Everything's wonderful. Close the transmission back up, put it in the car. So now we'll go ahead and I think you've seen enough of me putting these things in and out. I'll get this swapped around, put that one back in the other trans, close everybody up, and we'll move forward. Real quick before we close this up and move on to the next step. See, we got it in there, clocked the right way, check the operation. Ooh. But one more thing, in case you guys are actually using my videos to fix stuff at your house. That pin that we put back in, when you're putting your thing back together, as simple as this all is, you need to make sure when you're reinstalling this pin, and you're not going to need a hammer, by the way, it slides in pretty easy. You might need to like put a little piece of metal under your finger. I use the tip of a wrench and it just slides right in. But you need to be careful that you leave it up like it was to start with, where it's down below your mating surface but not so low that you can't pull it back out again if you ever got to come back in here and mess with this thing again. Yep, there you go. Wonderful tip. Look at parking pole. Now we've got our shifter situation sorted. We did have to put a bend on the guy. If you can see him there, that is for, it had the bend in it before for clearance on our electronic doohickey here. So all we had to do to sort the shifters to go from a 92 to a 97 is we had to move this bracket from the car to this. We had to swap this guy, which all he does is tell the computer what gear you're in. The reason we had to swap it, the electronics are the same, but the little stubby mounts aren't. We'd need a stack of washers on the one from the 92. If we just use this one, it's all factory. And we had to clock that shift arm 180 the other way and put a little swoop out on it. That way things don't bind. Now that we've got that figured out, we can start moving transmissions around, getting that one out of the way, getting this one back in the appropriate place to be mounted back to this. Ooh, boys. We're putting things back together. Alright. Now I've got the transmission with the conveniently flat pan. Unlike the 4R70, got the stupid bleep right there in the middle of it for the pickup tube. And we've got it sitting on my board here with the wheels so I can slide it back and forth. Now I'm going to come over here to the motor. You see I've got her all now I'm going to come over here to the motor. See, I've got her all hooked back up to my engine leveler guy. And we're going to lift it up in the air, take all the stands and stuff out from underneath it, find, appropriate heights, slide back in, you see what I mean? Up, down, back, forth, yeah. Woo, look at that. I have the transmission case. Step over my mess here. Kitty litter. I have my transmission case lined up with the motor. Might be too dark in there, but yeah, you can see it. We got our bolt coming through on the flywheel, and now we can run around the case, goop up all our bolts, and bolt the engine and transmission together for the first time. So that's pretty special. Never really ever pulled an engine until a few months ago on the channel you seen, and this is the first time I've ever connected an engine back to the transmission. Here in a minute will be the first time I've ever put an engine and trans back in a vehicle. It's a whole lot of firsts today, boys. Woo! Hope it all works for a while. One more slight modification. We're up to like 4, 5 now that we'll be making to make this thing mate here. This trans came from, I think that's a generation 1 4.6 liter mod Ford. It's an engine, and I believe this is a generation 2. So they're like way different here on the back side. See, this is the intake up here, throttle body, whatever, and on the other motor it's kind of like hanging off the back side. And this EGR nonsense that I really need to delete on. I just don't know enough about deleting all that stuff yet. But this big pipe is in the way of the dipstick that goes with the AODE being able to mount up to its mounting spot there on the top of the bell housing. So what I've figurated is over here, this one above is the AODE filler checker tube, and this is the one from the 4R70. And we need this tube in the AODE trans because of this bracket. That bracket hits everything, this bracket works around everything, and it works with that engine. However, when we come down here and look at this end, it looks like a big, huge, major, oh my god, this guy sticks. By the way, the ends of these tubes are exactly the same, but this guy sticks 1 7/8 of an inch out, and that guy sticks 2 1/4 inches out. So it looks like, oh man, this is going to be not very accurate. However, when we get down here real close, where you probably can't see nothing, the crosshatch areas on these dipsticks is identical, slightly less than 5/8 of an inch from the center of this circle to the top of the crosshatch. That's the same on both dipsticks. The difference here is the ends of the sticks are like shorter here, that one's longer, but the bottom end of this crosshatch is 1/8 of an inch lower than this one. So we're not really dealing with a big giant 3/8, 1/4 inch, whatever, 5/8, whatever the other guy was, you know, the difference from the ends. All we're dealing with is 1/8. So this is going to be, when we use the tube from the 4R70 in our AODE, the bottom of our crosshatch area is going to be a 1/8 inch too deep, meaning when we fill it up, we're going to need to see an 1/8 inch of fluid above the top of the full mark. Then we're all accurate, up to spec, where we need to be. So yeah, that's just one more thing to deal with real quick while we're cobbling together, you know, pieces from something else to pieces of this, but not too big of a deal really. We just need to make sure the level stays a little above full, and then we're alright using the 4R70 dipstick on the AODE. Now I've got all our bell housing bolts reinstalled. That tube fits fine now that we're using the other dipstick tube. All the bell housing bolts are torqued 45 pounds. And next, we'll come back down here and reinstall the nuts to the torque converter, to the flex plate flywheel guy, and those torque to 20 to 34 foot-pounds. Big old giant 14-pound window. Okay then. Now, where's my hand? Help me. Oh, there it is. Now we have all our torque converter bolts tightened up to their spec. We even put the plug back in place so our newly cleaned bell housing doesn't get all full of junk again. We have our inspection cover bolted back in place. We also cleaned it very well. That way we can check on the status of our rear main seal replacement. After we get the car running again, we'll actually be able to tell if it starts leaking because it's not all covered in oil in there. And now we are moving to hooking up all the electronics and everything that I want already hooked to the motor before we drop it in the car. Like, I believe it might not be bad to put that starter in with everything in place, but I believe we want to put the starter in. I know we want to plug in all our wiring harness on the trans because those are hard to get to when it's in place. And I also wanted to point out, I thought this was pretty neat. I was wondering how easy it was going to be to re-plug up the harness because there's kind of a lot of connections here. Not really when you take out the O2 sensors. But I took my harness, which was laying on the motor, draped it down on top of the trans, and everything kind of went right where it needs to go. There's that guy there. This plug fell right next to where it goes. This one's right by there. This is one of the rear O2 sensors. This is the other rear O2 sensor. And these green guys hanging up here, and where's the other one? Right here. Those are the front O2 sensors. So yeah, now we just got to plug some more stuff in, mount up a starter, and the next thing you guys will see is another time lapse of it going up and in. Here I got one more little tip for you real quick, maybe an obvious thing, but might not be for some people. You see our clip here, I just reinstallated on the trans. We got one more on the top. These things could be like a pain in the butt if you're trying to, drive around it with a hammer or just push it on. But I found a real quick, easy thing to do. Take a socket like 3/8 drive, put the square bit down, and then you can tap it one time with the hammer. Tap it one time with the hammer, and then it sets the whole thing down nice, flush and even and easy, and you don't got to keep and it just bending and being a pain. So now we have the drivetrain sat back in place. We have our transmission mount done up here at the cross member. And by the way, everything worked with our original cross member and our original trans mount. They all lined right up with the back of this guy, even though that's a different tail shaft housing on the AODE in here now. Ooh. And then I got the catalytic pipulators put back on, and we're gonna do the dual exhaust a little bit later. I think I'm gonna get this car all the way put back together, so my old lady could drive it back to work again, and me not drive her back and forth to work. And then in the very next video, we'll get the cop car pulled in here, and we'll just snatch its dual pipulators out. Anywho, we got the drive shaft back in as well. So I'm wrapped up underneath the car here. You can't see it, but there's a drive shaft over there. There's a bit of it. And we have an aluminum drive shaft now, because I had to run the cop car's drive shaft on account of the tail shaft on the back of the trans up there that you also can't see at the moment. It's longer. Yes, I think it's longer. It's longer, so the drive shaft needs to be a little shorter, so we just, use the drive shaft from the other car. But that might be a cool thing anyway, because that aluminum shaft weighs a lot less than the steel one that I just pulled out, so hey, maybe we'll get more fuel economy. I don't know. Probably not. And up here it all looks the same still. There's more assembly required. I've got my big mysterious EGR controller looking majigger thing back there all plugged back in, got our grounds hooked back up, all the electrical bits are plugged back in, we got throttle cableage now. Oop, goes that way. Power steering bits are hooked back up. We're going to come in here to the heater hose little repair that I did a couple years ago, where I've got a regular 5/8 heater hose running from the back side of the water pump out this hole in the intake to the heater core, and we're just going to go ahead and replace on that with a fresh new hose while we're in here, because it seems like, this could be a high temperature situation down here. Not that you can see it, because we know that this could be like a high temp situation. This may be a rough area for a heater hose to live. That's probably why they had a metal pipe in here before. However, it looks nice. Hose looks fine. We could probably get away, keep using it. It definitely isn't like bloated or looking bad, but I'm thinking preventative maintenance while I have everything torn down and the alternator out of the way, I might as well just snip a new hose in there. So here's what my heater hose looks like after, oh geez, I probably should have looked it up. I don't know, 2, 3, 4, a couple years that we've had that thing in there. And it looks like she has fared pretty nicely. So I don't think I'm worried about this type, because this is like a heck of a repair here. See, I'm using the 5/8 rubber hose as opposed to getting the whatever it is, $60, $70, $80 part that goes in here, which is just a metal tube that runs along, stabs out the back there, hose goes from there to the heater core, and the metal tube has a couple inch long piece of rubber bit that stabs over that nipple right there. Yep, there you go. And that thing's like 2-3 inches long, so you got a lot to play with on it whenever you hook the rubber hose to it. You got room for a lot of clampage, you know what I mean? And it was nice and dry in there after all this time, so it looks like we haven't had any leak issues. I think I'm going to be definitely fine to keep going this route with the $2-3 worth of heater hose instead of the $70 part. And the big thing about that $70 part is you have to pull the intake manifold, either that or pull the whole engine out, and maybe you could snake it in from the backside, because I removed that bit of pipe from the backside. But yeah, you either got to pull the engine out or take the whole intake manifold off. And if you know anything about these 4.6 liter and their plastic intake manifolds, if it's not cracked and broken leaking, you don't want to take it off, because it probably will be by the time you get it off. Alright, now we are all buttoned up and put back together. It's time to add fluids finally. Woo! Now we can fill up our transmission fluid, the power steering reservoir, that's been emptied, and our radiator. And we also should check the oil level because, you know, she's been, it may have leaked a little. Alright, now we got our coolant reservoir and the radiator filled, and our power steering reservoir is filled up, and we've got roughly 11 quarts in the transmission. She holds 12.3 full. I think I'm around 11 to 11 and a half in there, so we're gonna fire it up for a short bit, let things run. We should power steering fluid level should drop, transmission level will drop dramatically because the torque converter is only like partially filled right now. And so far we're looking good in the leak department. No drippies or over here. No drippies or, you know, swollen gasket fluid coming out the edge, so that's a good sign because it's way over that gasket line right now. So it's not dripping now, that's good. So now let's fire up the pump and see how everything looks. So we just attempted to start it, and we have the ignition run circuit, all our lights come on and everything, but when we crank over to start, nothing happens to the starter. I just checked our voltage, the battery looks good. I'm thinking the little sensor doodad on the side of our shifter, on the side of the trans, that tells the car's computer what gear we're in, I bet that's out of adjustment. This is the side of the trans, right next to this catalytic converter, and see, that's the doodad I'm talking about. You see those bolts on the left and right? When you loosen, hold on. When you loosen these bolts, it makes it where you can turn this thing this way, and I'm all in the light. There you go. It makes it where you can turn this thing this way and that way, and it seems to me like that's a bit of an adjustment. So I just loosened the nuts and I turned it over one way, tightened them down. We'll try to crank it again and see if that don't take care of it. If it doesn't, we'll try turning it the other way, because I'm thinking our issue is the trans is in park, and on the dash it says park, but I bet here the computer thinks we're not in park. As it turns out, it's not the guy out of alignment. It seems like when I'm in park, it's actually in reverse, so I've got my whole shift cable one gear out of alignment. This is where we just were, at our shift cable bracket here. That part right there with the bolt and nut, that has a slide hole there, so you have lots of adjustment back and forth. I accidentally had it adjusted to be showing park while we were in reverse. Now I believe we have it adjusted to be showing park while we're in park. Let's see if that solves our problems. Okay. Now, park on the display. Ha! Yay! That's better. Woo! Now we can let it warm up and check for leaks all over the place while it does it. Then when it's warmed up, we can finalize on the transmission fluid level. You've seen a second ago where we couldn't get the car to crank because it didn't think it was in, well, because it wasn't in park.
And you see our shifter there, we had adjusted that all the way out. That didn't give us enough adjustment, so I had to take the roto tool to the end of the cable there and make the slot in it longer. Now we have our Prindle indicator in the dash all lined up nice right on top of the P like it needs to be when it's in park. However, this other guy, oh my god, I hate that thing so much. So, because of our funky arm situation here where we couldn't use the arm that has the appropriate bend in it back here, we were having major problems with contacting the back side of this guy here. So I had to take this thing off, whittle on the end of it, try to pound some of the bends out of it. That didn't go very well. They just bend back when you try to straighten it back out. And then the bend that I had on our shifter arm out of the trans here, I had it bent too severely, so it was clearing this fine and all that was great. But when she transitioned all the way to park, instead of it being, you know, bent even, the bend started like tilting this way, that way, and that made it where when you went all the way to park, it was trying to undo the shifter. It was trying to undo the connection on it, that pivot point. So that wasn't any good. So I had to take some of that bend back out. So now the pivot point doesn't come loose. But then we were getting all up against this plastic on this guy, and I'm sure there's a circuit board in there, and if we let it rub back and forth on this plastic on the inside here, I'm betting that's gonna make it where we ground out electronicals on the inside of it when we get through the casing, so that's no good. So what we've ended up here with is, see all our washers in here, and in there we have just a little, you see the slit right here at my fingernail, there's just a little bit of engagement between the collar on the inside of this indicator electronic doodad and those slits on there. Hopefully just enough that it doesn't just strip them out over time. At least this collar is nice and easy to turn. But we had to get it so far out to clear our stuff up there, and all this is an issue because of that arm not having the appropriate bend in it. But I think I may have cobbled together something fairly reliable, as long as this plastic ring in here doesn't shear off of its keyways, which it may not, because it does have like a 1/4 inch in the keyway, and there's one on each side at least, and it turns nice, so maybe. So, yeah. Anyway, besides the shifter arm debacle and making clearance for the guy, and the solenoid inside the trans, and having to swap the drive shaft and everything with it because the tail shaft housing's a different length, and all that stuff, it's pretty much a she's a direct swap. But anyway, I think we might be all situated and ready for a test drive now. Now that we've got it all situated where everything's hooked up good, we already know we don't have leaks and the trans feels good moving back and forth in the shop, unless the shifter falls off. But now that we have the shifter falling off the situation situated, we can go take it out on the road and make sure that the transmission actually works, because it came out of this old retired cop car, and we know how people treat old retired cop cars. Yeah, at least she's a remanufactured trans, so hopefully there's not a whole bunch of miles on it. Anyway, without further ado, let's finally have a test drive. So far, the test drive is going pretty good.
aside from my stupid shifter issues we're having. These hood latches keep rattling around, making me think everything's messed up. We've made it quite a few miles, 20-30 miles back and forth. Got all the way to picking up the old lady. I think you're in the frame. But so far the test drive's going good. I still have the shifter dilemma where, like I showed y'all earlier, where the electronic doodad was mounted and I had to put the washers on it to space it out away from my linkage. Well, as it turns out, the shifter guy has those two slots in it, I believe I showed you, and the electronic doodad has these plastic tabs that slide into those slots. Well, their plastic tabs don't go all the way to the other side of the plastic ring in the electronic doodad. So when I spaced it out, I had another no crank condition where it looked like I was engaged slightly in the grooves, but it actually wasn't. So what I've done right now to make the test drive is I just reached under the car, twist the dial to park, fired it up, then you gotta reach under the car, twist the dial to drive, otherwise she won't shift and the trans won't see increased line pressure signals and all that, so you'll burn it up. But that's what I've done to make the test drive, and I believe when we get back to the shop here that we're going to mount it back up like it was with the washer guys where it's spaced out too far, and then I'm just going to line that plastic ring up where it needs to be in coordination with the shifter spindle thing. And then it seems like my best option is to use some super glue or some of that quick steel putty stuff and make that plastic ring in the electronic guy one with the metal shaft. So that'll take care of all of our issues, and the thing will twist back and forth with us. We won't have to reach under the car. The only thing that'll suck is when I have to mess with that ever again. If I ever have to take that electronic guy off, that's going to be not fun. But I think that might be worth it, because at least we have one more electronic doodad from our other car at home. So maybe if when that day comes I ever have to mess with that, I can just, you know, cut the one plastic doodad off and use the other one. We at least got two shots. Anyway, you see, still ain't got no hood yet, but she's rolling good. Overall, the transmission swap is a success. I think I may have mentioned to y'all in some of the previous videos too that this AODE has different gear ratios than the 4R70W we took out. Third gear and overdrive are the same, but first and second gear are lower in the 4R70. And I gotta tell you that I think I like the gear ratios in this AODE a lot better, because before the car it always sounded silly, the kind of RPMs it would gain just cruising up to normal driving speeds, 35-45 miles an hour. And now it feels like we're working a little more with the torque. We're not stretching RPMs so bad, and it just seems like the car eases around so much better than it did before. And I think the only reason they made that gear ratio change is so they could get a faster 0 to 60 time. Like, we care about that in a Vic. But anyway, yep, I think I'm real happy with it. Transmission change is a success. Just had a whole bunch of really silly, crazy nonsense to deal with to convert it from one car to the other. They definitely didn't intend on you going that direction, let me tell you. But I think I'm good with it, and we'll see you back at the shop. Or if we don't see you back at the shop, maybe this is the end of the video. I don't know. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. Bye. 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 See, we're back here in the shop. I'm gonna wrap this video up here in just a second, dig you in there real quick about what I was saying about taking care of our issue with the electronic tell the computer what gear you're in type of doodad. But first, there's one other thing that we're gonna have to address, and I believe we're gonna be able to take care of it swapping the the vehicle speed sensor that's in the tail shaft of the transmission.
I'm hoping the sensors are like calibrated one way or another, because our speedometer is like reading considerably slower than we're actually going, and I'm thinking that's probably due to the this transmission came out of this car, and it has a much taller first and second gear. The AODE it had, now we have it, but I'm thinking the rear end in that car probably has a taller ratio to make up for it, and correspondingly I bet this car has a lower rear end ratio because it had the 4R70 with the granny low first and second gear. So I'm hoping maybe I can just swap the wheel speed sensor out of the tail shaft of the 4R70 into the in place of the one in this car, and maybe that'll take care of it. I'm assuming that's how life works here in this situation. Not really sure. Maybe the sensor's calibrated, or either that or it's something that's done in the computer. I don't really know. We'll find out about that here later. Let me get you a glimpse on what I was talking about in the car on the road earlier. See, I have our guy set up the way it was before. I got my washers in here. This gives me, you may be able to see, I might just be showing you nothing. This gives me enough clearance that this linkage in here doesn't rub against the back side of this guy and put a hole in it and short it out and cause problems. But we're not on the spline. See this plastic coupler guy, plastic ring in here? Get the light over. There you go. This plastic ring in here isn't engaged on the splines on this metal shaft anymore. However, we still have metal shaft way up to here. It just doesn't, it's just got like flat cut off tabs on each side. There you go, you can kind of see it. It's just got like flat sides on each side, but what that does is it leaves me these cavities around on each side of that guy, and I'm going to try to take this quick steel putty product, stuff it in here, and make this plastic ring one piece to this shaft coming out of our shifter arm here. And they will just be forever together, and if we ever have to service this part, it'll just be really inconvenient. But I think that's going to take care of our major issues and the last big hurdle of converting this 97. I think that's going to take care of the last big hurdle of converting our 97 car to accept a 92 trans, and maybe we can go ahead and close out the video here, and y'all have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. Comment, like, subscribe. Let me know in the comments, is there anybody out there that's silly enough to swap an old, out-of-date transmission in a newer car? Maybe it's just me. Probably.